Because just as Einstein said, we can't resolve a problem from the level of thinking in which it was created. In fact, only this morning I got lost quite innocently. I got quite lost in my thinking about something. I'm currently going through a house purchase. So in between dealing with solicitors, the Scottish legal system, mortgage brokers, it's quite easy sometimes to get a little bit lost in your head. And so I called one of my associates and had a very brief chat with him. And it was a wonderful example of what we might call problem solving, because he let me talk for a few minutes and then he said, "What's your question?" And I stopped and I said, "That's a really good question. What is my question? What is it that I'm actually trying to gain from this discussion?" And for me, when I reflected on it, it was actually just a need for some clarity, because I'd been kind of going round and round in circles in my head about something, which is completely normal and it's natural because we're human beings and we are so in our heads more of the time. We are so either living in the future or reflecting on the past. We are very rarely in this present moment, in this power of now, as you might have also heard of it, which is all that we ever have, is right here in this moment. But when our mind, the minute that your mind is thinking about the past, the minute that your mind is thinking about anything, you're in the unconscious. You're no longer conscious. And the only place that we can really experience the kind of insight, the kind of wisdom that gives way to clarity is when we are in that present moment. So yesterday we were talking about listening, and how when we're really listening, when we are really just listening with nothing on our own minds, when we're creating that sense of connection, not just connection to another human being, but allowing them to connect to who they really are, allowing them to connect to their own inner wisdom. That's when we create what I would refer to as insight-friendly space. And when we're really listening and we're asking questions and we're getting that other person to reflect, what you'll notice more often than not is that somebody who's up here in their mind, and by up here, they've gone into a high range brainwave state, which is the high range beta brainwave state, which is effectively akin to chaos. When we really are listening, that we're fully present, people feel that. And when we start to ask a couple of questions, you can see them climb off emergency alert. You can see them, and this is why it's also important where we can to have cameras on. You can see them start to reflect. You can see them kind of accessing different parts of their brain with their eyes, which is what we're doing. We're accessing that wisdom, that insight, that intellect. So going back to this morning, so I had Tony ask me, "What is your question, Sarah?" And it really just struck me that I didn't really have the clarity initially that I was looking for. I was just kind of going, oh. And then his question was such a simple question, but it just cut through everything. And he just said to me, "Is thinking about this going to make any difference?" And I stopped and I reflected. And I said, "You know what, it's really not." Because where we've created the illusion of a problem, because a problem can only be deemed a problem because the mind is viewing it as a problem. So all problems exist in the mind because we are living that internally generated experience of the world moment to moment to moment, based on our perceptual map and model of the world. So if there's one thing that I would invite all of you to really take away from these 5 days, it is to remember that nothing out there exists, because we can only experience it through the mind. It only ever works one way, which is from the inside out. And as you've heard me say in session 1, we just get really conditioned to looking outside of ourselves, to going, I'm feeling stressed, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm worrying because of that thing over there. But because everything is that internally generated, thought created experience, it's only ever being experienced as a problem in the mind. So when Tony asked me, is thinking about this going to make any difference? It literally was just like shining a light on it and going, oh yeah, no, it's not. And in that moment, I also recognized and realized I just got caught up in my thinking. And the moment that I recognized that, I fell out of my thinking back into the present moment. And when I did that, the mind just automatically corrected itself. But your mind, it likes to chew things over. And as you heard me say yesterday, it creates problems because it's like it's got a purpose. It likes to solve problems, but it then creates problems in order to solve them. So it's like it's trying to keep employed. So the more that you, as a mental health first aider, or somebody that works with people and you support their mental health, just having that understanding of where is our experience really coming from can be such a game changer, because you know that when the person's talking to you, they're just talking about the narrative in their mind. And so asking some really simple but very powerful questions can cut through so much of that narrative. Because if we think about problem solving, whatever the problem is, again, in our mind, we have to understand, well, what is the problem? And we have to understand, well, what is it that the person wants to have happen? What is it that they want to create? What is it that they desire? Now, one of the things that I know to be absolutely true from working with people one-to-one for so many years now is people are really good at telling me all the things that they don't want to experience, that they don't want to have happen. So the conversation often goes along the lines of, well, I don't really want to feel anxious. I don't want to feel worried. I don't want to wake up with this feeling of dread in my stomach. I don't want to feel like killing my manager when we're in a team meeting. I don't want to feel like any of these things. But again, that story just reaffirms that narrative. And when I start to say, well, what is it that you'd love to have happen? They really sometimes struggle with that because they've not even considered what it is that they actually want. And as a mental health first aider, what I would encourage you to do, again, so we don't get stuck in the drama, we don't get stuck in the story, is to ask somebody at the beginning of a conversation, what would be a really great outcome to this conversation for you? Now, the individual might not necessarily know that. And again, it's very tempting for us to jump in and start giving examples of what they might want to have happen. But as I said yesterday, silence really is your best friend. In fact, there's the same letters in silent that there are in listen. Now, I know that you're going to start thinking about that and go, oh, yeah. So the more that we are just holding that space of connection, and we're just giving that person time to process on, well, what is it that would make a really great outcome for this conversation? Instead of diving in and trying to preempt them and take them in a direction that maybe the conversation doesn't need to go in, and just getting comfortable with not saying anything, letting that innate wisdom that we all have access to come to the surface.